Hello, Nick Leifker here, and welcome to the seventh and final week of Management 409, Operations Management. With this last week, we come full circle. We started by talking about the process, about taking stuff and making it into more valuable stuff. Well, it turns out that our suppliers are doing the same thing. Our suppliers are taking other stuff and turning it into what we find valuable. And their suppliers are taking stuff and they're making it into something more valuable. So you have this generation of value across several different companies. And it turned out that, well, with everything that we've learned up to now, companies were starting to get that right. They'd have their process well balanced. If projects needed to occur, they knew how to manage those. They had just the right amount of inventory. They had their quality just right. But it turned out that if they didn't manage your relationship with their suppliers or didn't manage your relationship with their customers, none of it mattered. Because, well, a good way of thinking about it, suppose you're running a high-quality restaurant, best quality restaurant you could possibly imagine. The sort of place that would have Michelin stars, okay? And so you want ingredients. You buy ingredients for this restaurant. Well, if the ingredients you buy are junk, how can you make something great out of that? Well, that's the problem with supply chain. And that is that for all that we do, if we don't manage that relationship with our suppliers, don't manage that relationship with our customers, none of it matters. So, how do you manage that relationship? Well, we're going to talk about some of that. We're going to talk about some of the issues that come with managing a supply chain, and we're going to talk about some of the quirks that come with a supply chain. A supply chain is essentially a huge process, so in some ways it's the same rules that apply to a process apply to a supply chain. But there are some quirks, there are some issues, there are some odd things that come up. And what we find is that what is good for an individual company in a supply chain may not be the best thing for that supply chain. Now, what I mean by that, why is a company in business? Well, usually a company is in business to make money, to generate value, get money from that value. Well, our suppliers are doing the same thing. Our customers are trying to do the same thing. So if all of these people are trying to maximize the amount of money that they get, well, they'll make decisions based on that goal, to make as much money as they can. But it turns out, once we start looking at this issue from a larger perspective, from a supply chain perspective, that what is good for the individual in the supply chain is not the same thing as what's good for the supply chain. A good way of thinking about it, it's the difference between maximizing your slice of the pie and maximizing the size of the pie. Now, we are going to talk about some other things this week. For instance, what type of supply chain should we have? This is the short answer is it depends. With a supply chain, the supply chain that you should have should match the strategy your company is going to compete on. So, if you're going to compete on cost, for instance, you need to wring every dime you can out of the supply chain. If you're going to compete on customer service, you need to have a fast supply chain. If you're going to compete on innovation, you need to be able to bring product to the market as fast as possible, develop product for the market as fast as possible. So the supply chain you have should match what you compete on. It should match your company's strategy. So we're going to look at ultimately how behavior works within supply chain, because behavior is important. It's not like we're dealing with one entity anymore. We're dealing with a whole bunch of different entities, a whole bunch of different people, all of whom are trying to hopefully make money. And we're going to see that very strange things happen when different people get together and try to work together at the same time as they're working against each other. in order to make money. So, you're almost done. One last week. There's a lot to get done. There's the exam coming up. There's a project that's due. So, be well, work hard. Once it's done, enjoy the rest, and be well.